Fitch's Fixed Interest podcast delivers the analyst insights and updates you need to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving market.
Welcome to Fixed Interest on USMCA. This is part 2 of 2, and in this episode, we'll be exploring how the USMCA annual review cycles will impact Mexico and Canada. Joining me today are Todd and Josh, who are the primary analysts for Mexico and Canada, respectively. Todd, first to you, could you give us details on where are the pressure points between Mexico and US on the USMCA? And how bad is a non-deal scenario?
So Mexico is clearly trying to be cooperative in this process. It's addressed most of these 54 non-tariff barriers the U.S. flagged. It's made some important concessions on issues like security and tariffs with China. But there are some important sticking points. You know, the U.S. has kept these sectoral tariffs on autos and steel. It also wants to tighten the rules of origin, and the combination of those two things is a problem for Mexico. And there might be other sticking points that aren't so germane to trade, you know, issues of security and drugs, etc. So what does the no deal scenario mean for Mexico? It's actually not such a bad backdrop because it preserves the status quo, which involves tariff exemptions for most Mexican exports, and that helped them grow quite a bit last year. But it's not a good backdrop for investment. You know, investment in Mexico was already sluggish. Inward FDI of 2% of GDP is pretty low. And while some of that sluggishness is due to domestic issues, I think it's fair to say that USMCA uncertainty is a drag. For example, recently, Toyota announced plans to relocate some of its production from Tijuana to Texas. What would a good deal look like for Mexico? You know, we don't think just any deal would be good news by turning the page on this issue. The content needs to be good for Mexico too. For example, if the U.S. forces Mexico to tighten the rules of origin but keeps these tariffs on autos, it's bad news for the sector. It hurts its competitiveness relative to the EU, which faces similar tariffs to enter the U.S. but can source its inputs more freely. And a good deal was also one that we think needs to offer predictability, and that's a big if. After all, the USMCA is Trump's own deal that he negotiated in his first term, but it hasn't tied his hands. He's taken quite a bit of unilateral tariff action in his second term.
And Josh, what about Canada?
So Canada has been a bit less accommodating than Mexico. The Mexican government has been negotiating for about 6 months with the United States, but formal negotiations have not yet started with Canada, although some informal conversations have been happening at sort of ambassadorial level. Canada, though, has stepped back a little bit from some of the retaliatory measures last year, which has been an effort to sort of, cool some tensions. But ultimately, I think, Canada's in the process of sort of strengthening its negotiating hands in preparation for negotiations. This includes, for instance, provincial liquor bans, which have been left in place, presumably to be taken off the table during an actual agreement at a later date. Canada has also been trying to diversify trade away from the United States. Roughly 70 to 75% of exports go to the United States. This is both a negotiating tactic, for instance, a recent deal with China on the importation of electric vehicles, but it's also an economic goal of reducing reliance on the U.S. This will probably never be fully achieved given the geographic proximity and the integration between the two economies, but it may help offset some exposure. Ultimately, though, the Canadian government is looking to get the best deal possible with the U.S., so much of what has sort of been occurring now is sort of an effort at preparing for negotiations. The U.S. recently announced 50% tariffs on certain goods in Canada, which prompted Prime Minister Carney to agree to intensify conversations in the near future. The main areas that will be impacted, include the automotive sector, lumber, dairy, steel, and aluminum. And there's primary issues, including the rules of origin, Buy Canada policies, the U.S. liquor ban, and transshipment from China. Ultimately, these sectors are being more narrowly impacted, but more broadly, as Todd mentioned, uncertainty's impact on the economy is really the big issue here. It's been a drag on investment, but businesses are to some degree already starting to adapt a little bit to this sort of new normal that's experienced, and investment growth, at least, if not levels, have somewhat normalized.
Thanks a lot, Josh and Todd, for your insights. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to hear more on USMCA, you can access our research on our website, fitchratings.com. Thank you.
Subscribe to Fixed Interests wherever you get your podcasts.